What if everything you've been taught about desire is a lie? You wake up wanting. You go to sleep wanting. Between those two moments, you chase, you consume, you achieve, and yet the wanting never stops. It follows you like a shadow. And somewhere, buried beneath the noise of ambition and success, a quiet voice whispers, "Is this all there is?" We've been taught that desire is natural, that ambition is good, that wanting more is the engine of progress, the sign of a life well lived. But what if desire isn't the path to happiness? What if it's the root of all suffering? Arthur Schopenhauer didn't believe in fairy tales. He didn't promise you fulfillment, success, or inner peace through positive thinking. Instead, he offered something far more unsettling, the truth. And the truth, according to Schopenhauer, is brutal. We are not meant to be happy. We are meant to want. And in that wanting, we are trapped in an endless cycle of craving and disappointment, of hunger and emptiness, of reaching and never quite grasping. He called this force the will, not your personal will, not your conscious choices, but something deeper, darker, more primal, a blind, irrational hunger that drives all living things. The will doesn't care about your happiness. It doesn't care about meaning or purpose. It simply wants. And it uses you as its instrument. This is not pessimism for the sake of darkness. This is philosophy at its most honest. Because once you see the will at work in your own life, once you recognize the patterns of craving that govern your days, you can't unsee it. You can't go back to pretending that one more achievement, one more purchase, one more relationship will finally make you whole. But here's the deeper question, the one that haunts every moment of awareness. If we are trapped by the will, if suffering is woven into the very fabric of existence, is there any way out? Schopenhauer believed there was. Not through more wanting, but through its opposite. Not through chasing desire, but through denying it. Not through reaching outward, but through turning inward toward a kind of peace that doesn't depend on getting what you want, but on stopping the wanting altogether. This is the paradox at the heart of his philosophy. The only escape from suffering is to stop playing the game. But can you? And if you could, would you even want to? Look around. What do you see? A world of striving, of movement, of restless energy pouring into goals, projects, relationships, careers. Everyone is chasing something. And underneath all of it, beneath the surface of ambition and progress, lies a single force, the will. Schopenhauer saw what most of us spend our lives trying to ignore, that we are not in control, that the desires we believe are our own are not really ours at all. They are expressions of something older, something blind, something that cares nothing for our individual happiness. The will to live, the blind force that pushes every living forward, not toward meaning, but simply toward existence, toward survival, toward continuation. It is the hunger that wakes you in the morning, the restlessness that keeps you scrolling at night, the dissatisfaction that lingers even after you've achieved what you thought you wanted. The will doesn't operate through logic or reason. It operates through impulse, through craving, through the relentless pressure to want more, to be more, to have more. And here's the trap. The will can never be satisfied. Because satisfaction would mean the end of wanting. And the end of wanting would mean the end of life itself. So the will keeps you moving, keeps you hungry, keeps you reaching for the next thing, and the next, and the next. It promises fulfillment, but delivers only the temporary relief of a desire, momentarily quieted before the next one rises. Think about it. You wanted the job. You got it. And for a moment, you felt relief, maybe even joy. But how long did it last? Days? Weeks? Before the satisfaction faded and a new hunger took its place. A better position, more recognition, a different path entirely. The wanting didn't stop. It just shifted. You wanted the relationship. You found it. And for a while, it felt like enough. But then the doubts crept in. The restlessness returned. The fantasy of something else, someone else, some other version of happiness that might finally be the one. The will doesn't care that you're in love. It only cares that you keep wanting. This is what Schopenhauer meant when he said life is suffering. Not that every moment is agony, but that every moment is driven by a lack, by an absence, by a need that can never be permanently filled. We are not beings who occasionally want. We are beings made of wanting. And that wanting is the source of all our pain, because every desire contains within it the seed of disappointment. To want something is to feel its absence. To achieve it is to experience a brief reprieve before the cycle begins again. We swing between craving and boredom, between the pain of not having and the emptiness of having obtained. There is no resting place. There is only the pendulum swinging endlessly between two forms of dissatisfaction. And the worst part? Most of us don't even realize we're trapped. We think the problem is that we haven't found the right thing yet. The right career, the right partner, the right lifestyle. We think happiness is just around the corner, that fulfillment is one more step away. So we keep chasing. We keep believing that the next desire will be different, that this time satisfaction will last. But Schopenhauer knew better. He saw that the structure of desire itself guarantees suffering. Not because we're unlucky, not because we're choosing wrong, but because wanting is the problem. The will is the problem. And as long as we're alive, as long as we're driven by this blind force, we will suffer. This is the tyranny of the will, not a cruel God punishing us. Not a personal failing we can overcome, but the very mechanism of life itself. To be alive is to want. And to want is to suffer. So what do we do with this knowledge? Do we rage against it? Do we pretend it isn't true? Or do we look deeper, past the surface of our desires, toward the possibility that freedom might not come from getting what we want, but from understanding why we want it in the first place? Because once you see the will at work, once you recognize its patterns in your own life, something shifts. The wanting doesn't disappear, but the illusion does. And in that space, in that moment of clarity, a different kind of question begins to emerge. If the will is the source of suffering, can it be denied? We live in a world designed to feed the will. Every advertisement, every notification, every carefully curated image on your screen is engineered to awaken desire, to make you feel that something is missing, that you are not enough as you are. That happiness is just one click, one purchase, one upgrade away. The modern world doesn't just allow the will to operate. It amplifies it. It weaponizes it. It turns the natural human tendency toward wanting into an industrial machine of perpetual dissatisfaction. You scroll through your feed and see someone's perfect morning routine. Suddenly, your own morning feels inadequate. You see someone's vacation, their body, their relationship, their success. And a quiet voice inside whispers, "Why not me?" The comparison is instant. The craving is automatic. And just like that, the will has you. This is not accidental. This is design. Because a satisfied person is not a profitable person. A person at peace doesn't consume, doesn't upgrade, doesn't chase the next thing. So the system must keep you wanting. It must keep you believing that fulfillment is possible, that it's real, that it's waiting for you just beyond the next achievement. But here's what Schopenhauer understood centuries before social media, before consumerism, before the age of infinite choice. Fulfillment is an illusion. Not because good things don't exist, but because the structure of desire makes lasting satisfaction impossible. Every time you get what you want, the goalpost moves. Every time you reach a milestone, a new one appears. The promotion you dreamed of becomes the job you tolerate. The relationship you idealized becomes the routine you question. The body you work for becomes the body you maintain with anxiety. Nothing stays enough. Because the will doesn't know how to stop. And so we enter the cycle. Desire, pursuit, achievement, brief satisfaction, then emptiness. And the emptiness feels like failure. Like something went wrong. Like we chose poorly. So we look for the next thing. The next goal. The next fix. Believing, always believing, that this time will be different. But it never is. Because the problem isn't what you're chasing. The problem is the chasing itself. Schopenhauer called this the pendulum of existence. We swing between the pain of unfulfilled desire and the boredom of achieved desire. Between wanting and having. Between hunger and emptiness. And neither side offers peace. One side burns with craving. The other side goes numb with meaninglessness. Think about the last time you got something you really wanted. Maybe it was a goal you worked toward for months or years. Maybe it was something you thought would change everything. And when you finally got it, how did it feel? Good, yes. Exciting, maybe. But how long before the glow faded? How long before normal returned? How long before the question crept back in? What now? This is not ingratitude. This is not a character flaw. This is the structure of the human condition. Because the will doesn't reward you for achieving your desires. It simply generates new ones. And each new desire feels just as urgent, just as necessary, just as promising as the last. We are told that the solution is to dream bigger, to want more intentionally, to align our goals with our values. But Schopenhauer would say that's just the will speaking through new language. That no amount of reframing or repackaging will change the fundamental truth. As long as you are driven by desire, you are driven by suffering. And in the modern world, that suffering is intensified. Because now, we don't just desire what we see in our immediate lives. We desire what we see in the lives of everyone, everywhere, all the time. The curated highlight reels, the success stories, the transformations, the proof that happiness is possible, that it's achievable, that someone out there has figured it out. But they haven't. They're on the same pendulum, swinging between wanting and having, between craving and boredom. The only difference is that you're seeing their peak moments and comparing them to your average ones. You're mistaking performance for reality. And in doing so, you're feeding the will with an endless supply of new desires, new inadequacies, new reasons to believe you're falling short. The result is exhaustion. Not just physical tiredness, but existential fatigue. The weariness that comes from chasing without arriving, from wanting without satisfaction, from living in a state of perpetual incompleteness. And yet, we keep going. Because what else is there? If we stop wanting, if we stop striving, if we stop chasing, what are we left with? The fear of that question keeps most people trapped. Better to keep moving than to face the possibility that there's nowhere to go. But Schopenhauer is asking you to face it. To look directly at the machinery of desire and see it for what it is. Not a path to happiness, but a treadmill of suffering. Not a journey toward fulfillment, but a loop with no exit. Because once you see this clearly, once you stop believing in the illusion of fulfillment, you're left with a choice. Keep playing the game, knowing it's rigged. Or find another way. So let me ask you this. What have you been chasing? And has it ever been enough? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know if you recognize this pattern in your own life. So if desire is the problem, if the will is the source of all suffering, what's the solution? How do you escape a force that is woven into the very fabric of your being? Schopenhauer's answer is not what most people want to hear. Because it doesn't involve getting what you want. It involves letting go of wanting altogether. This is not the letting go you hear about in self-help books. This is not the release that comes from surrendering to the universe or trusting the process. This is something far more radical. This is the denial of the will itself. The refusal to participate in the game of desire. the deliberate turning away from the impulses that drive most human behavior. But how? How do you deny something so fundamental? How do you stop wanting when wanting is what keeps you alive? Schopenhauer offered 3 paths. 3 ways to temporarily or permanently quiet the will. 3 methods of liberation from the tyranny of desire. The first is through art, through aesthetic contemplation. In those rare moments when you stand before a painting, listen to a piece of music, or lose yourself in a story, something shifts. The will goes quiet. The constant pressure to want, to strive, to reach for the next thing, it fades. And what remains is pure perception, pure awareness. You are no longer a subject with desires. You are simply a mirror reflecting the world as it is. This is why art moves us. Not because it gives us what we want, but because it allows us for a moment to stop wanting. To exist without the burden of self, without the weight of craving. In that space, there is peace. Not the peace of satisfaction, but the peace of forgetting. Forgetting that you are a being driven by need. Forgetting the endless cycle of desire. And in that forgetting, you touch something beyond suffering. But this is temporary. The moment passes. The music ends. The painting fades from view. And the will returns, as hungry as before. Art offers glimpses of freedom, but it cannot sustain it. The second path is compassion. When you truly see another person suffering, when you recognize that they are driven by the same blind will, the same irrational hunger, the same endless craving, something softens. The boundaries between self and other begin to dissolve. You realize that the struggle is universal, that everyone is trapped in the same cycle. And in that recognition, the will loosens its grip. Compassion is not pity. It is not feeling sorry for someone. It is seeing through the illusion of separation. It is understanding that the suffering you feel is the same suffering everyone feels. And in that understanding, your own desires become less urgent, less personal, less consuming. But compassion too has its limits. It can reduce suffering. It can create connection. But it cannot eliminate the will. It can only soften its edges. The third path is the most extreme and the most controversial. Asceticism, the deliberate renunciation of desire. The conscious choice to deny the body, to reject pleasure, to turn away from all the things the will demands. To live simply, quietly, without the constant pursuit of more. This is not about punishing yourself. It is about recognizing that as long as you feed the will, it will continue to control you. And the only way to break free is to stop feeding it. To stop giving in to every impulse. To stop believing that satisfaction is possible. To stop chasing the next thing. The ascetic doesn't reject life because they hate it. They reject the will because they see it clearly. They see that desire is a trap. And the only way out is to stop playing the game. But here's the question most people can't get past. If you deny desire, if you turn away from pleasure, from ambition, from all the things that make life feel alive, what's left? What is life without wanting? Schopenhauer would say, freedom. The freedom that comes not from getting what you want, but from no longer being controlled by wanting. The freedom that arises when you stop swinging between craving and boredom. When you step off the pendulum and into stillness. This is not emptiness. This is clarity. The clarity that comes from seeing life as it is, without the distortion of desire. Without the constant pressure to reach for something beyond the present moment. And in that clarity, something unexpected emerges. Not happiness in the conventional sense. Not the burst of dopamine that comes from achievement. But something quieter, deeper, more stable. A peace that doesn't depend on circumstances. A calm that doesn't require the world to be a certain way. This is the art of denial. Not the denial of life, but the denial of the force that makes life suffering. Not the rejection of existence, but the rejection of the endless hunger that prevents you from being present with existence as it is. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people won't take this path because it requires something most of us are not willing to give up. The hope that someday, somehow, desire will finally deliver what it promises. The belief that the next thing will be different. That fulfillment is possible. That happiness is waiting. Schopenhauer knew this. He knew that the denial of the will is not for everyone. That most people would rather keep chasing, keep hoping, keep believing in the illusion. Because the alternative, the idea that there is no prize at the end, that satisfaction is a mirage, that the only peace comes from stopping the chase, is too much to bear. But for those who are willing to look, for those who are tired of the cycle, for those who can no longer unsee the patterns of craving that govern their lives, the path is there, narrow, uncomfortable, unglamorous, but real. And I want to thank you, truly, for staying with me this far, for sitting with ideas that are not easy, that are not comforting, that do not promise you a better future or a happier life. Most people would have turned away by now, but you're still here. And that tells me something. It tells me you're not looking for quick fixes. You're looking for truth. And the truth, as Schopenhauer knew, is rarely gentle, but it is always worth seeking. And the best, the deepest part of this exploration is still ahead. There is a burden that comes with seeing clearly, a weight that settles in once you've looked past the illusions most people live by. Because once you recognize the will at work, once you see the patterns of desire that govern human behavior, you can't pretend anymore. You can't go back to chasing with innocent hope. You can't believe in the promise of fulfillment the way you once did. This is the price of awareness. And it is not a small price. Schopenhauer understood this better than most. He lived it. A man who saw through the machinery of existence and found himself standing on the other side of hope, staring into the abyss of meaninglessness. And the question that haunted him, the question that haunts anyone who follows his philosophy to its conclusion, is this: once you see the truth, how do you continue living? Because knowledge does not make life easier. It makes it harder. Ignorance is not just bliss. It is fuel. It is the engine that keeps most people moving forward. The belief that their desires matter, that their goals are meaningful, that happiness is achievable, that life has a point. But when you strip away those beliefs, when you see desire for what it is, a blind force with no purpose, no direction, no care for your individual happiness, what's left? What motivates you to get out of bed? What justifies the effort of existence? This is the existential crisis at the heart of Schopenhauer's philosophy. Not just that life is suffering, but that once you see it clearly, the suffering becomes conscious. You can no longer distract yourself with hope. You can no longer numb yourself with ambition. You stand naked before the absurdity of existence, and you have to decide, do I keep going? And if so, why? For some, the answer is the denial of the will, the path of asceticism, the deliberate choice to step out of the game entirely, to live quietly, simply, without participation in the endless cycle of craving. This is liberation through withdrawal, freedom through refusal. But for most, even those who see clearly, complete denial is not possible. Because we are still alive. We still feel hunger. We still experience desire. We still have bodies that demand attention, minds that generate wants, hearts that reach for connection. The will does not disappear just because you've seen through it. So the question becomes, how do you live in the world while seeing the world for what it is? How do you participate in life without being consumed by it? How do you honor your desires without being enslaved by them? This is the tightrope, the tension between knowledge and action, between seeing the futility of desire and still choosing to desire, between recognizing that fulfillment is impossible and still reaching for moments of beauty, connection, meaning. Schopenhauer himself lived this tension. He wrote extensively about the denial of the will, about the path of asceticism, about the liberation that comes from renunciation. And yet, he lived in the world. He had ambitions. He wanted recognition for his work. He experienced anger, frustration, disappointment. He was not a monk. He was a philosopher, a man who saw the truth but could not fully escape it. And maybe that's the real lesson. That awareness is not a solution. It is simply a shift in perspective. It doesn't free you from suffering. It changes how you relate to suffering. It doesn't eliminate desire. It changes how you hold desire. When you see the will at work, you can still feel its pull. But you are no longer fooled by it. You no longer believe that this desire will be the one that finally satisfies. You no longer attach your identity to outcomes. You no longer measure your worth by how much you achieve or acquire. Instead, you begin to hold life more lightly. You participate without clinging. You desire without demanding. You reach without grasping. You experience pleasure without needing it to last. And you experience pain without believing it defines you. This is not detachment in the cold, distant sense. It is engagement without illusion, presence without expectation. A life lived fully, but not desperately. A life that acknowledges suffering as fundamental, while refusing to make suffering the center of everything. But even this comes at a cost. Because to live this way is to live alone in a certain sense. Most people around you will still be chasing, still believing, still hoping. And you, having seen through the game, will watch them from a distance. Not with judgment, but with a kind of quiet sadness. Because you know what they don't yet see. You know where the chasing leads. And you cannot unsee it. This loneliness is part of the price. The isolation that comes from awareness. From seeing what others refuse to see. From standing outside the collective dream and recognizing it as a dream. And yet, there is also a strange kind of freedom in this loneliness. Because when you stop needing the world to validate your choices, when you stop measuring your life against others, when you stop believing that happiness is the goal, you become untouchable in a way. Not invulnerable, but unreachable. The opinions of others lose their power. The judgments of society lose their sting. You are no longer playing by rules you never agreed to. This is the paradox of Schopenhauer's philosophy. The more clearly you see the meaninglessness of desire, the more free you become. Not because life suddenly becomes meaningful, but because you stop demanding that it be. You stop insisting that existence justify itself. You stop asking life to deliver something it was never designed to give. And in that surrender, in that radical acceptance of life as it is, blind, purposeless, driven by a force that cares nothing for your happiness, something shifts. The suffering doesn't disappear, but the relationship to suffering changes. It is no longer proof of failure. It is simply what is, and maybe that's all we can ask for. Not the absence of pain, not the presence of joy, but the capacity to be present with whatever arises, to live without the constant overlay of judgment, to experience each moment as it is, without needing it to be something else. This is the price of awareness. The loss of innocence, the death of naive hope, the end of the belief that desire will save you. But it is also a strange kind of gift, because once you stop waiting for life to give you what it cannot, you stop wasting your time. You stop chasing shadows, and you begin, perhaps for the first time, to live. So here we are, at the end of the path, standing at the edge of a question that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. What if there is no answer? What if the search for meaning, the pursuit of happiness, the endless striving for more, what if all of it is just the will disguised as purpose? Schopenhauer doesn't comfort you. He doesn't tell you that everything happens for a reason. He doesn't promise that your suffering has meaning. He offers no redemption arc, no happy ending, no light at the end of the tunnel. Instead, He offers something far more unsettling and far more honest, the possibility of liberation through surrender, not surrender to a higher power, not surrender to fate or destiny, but surrender to the truth that life is not designed to make you happy. That desire will never be satisfied. That the will, the blind force driving all existence, has no plan for your fulfillment. And that the only way out is to stop fighting it. This is not giving up. This is waking up. Because as long as you believe that happiness is the goal, as long as you believe that the next achievement, the next relationship, the next purchase will finally be enough, you remain trapped. You remain a servant to the will. You remain on the pendulum, swinging between craving and boredom, between pain and emptiness. But the moment you let go of that belief, the moment you stop demanding that life deliver what it cannot, something extraordinary happens. The pressure lifts. The urgency fades. The endless chase loses its grip. And what remains is not despair. It is peace. Not the peace of having achieved your desires, but the peace of no longer being controlled by them. This is the liberation Schopenhauer speaks of. The freedom that comes not from getting what you want, but from wanting less. Not from fulfilling your desires, but from seeing them for what they are, temporary, irrational, ultimately meaningless impulses generated by a force that cares nothing for your well-being. And in that seeing, in that clarity, you reclaim something essential. Your presence, your awareness, your capacity to experience life without the constant overlay of judgment, comparison, and craving. You stop living in the future, in the fantasy of what could be, and you begin to live in the present, in the reality of what is. This doesn't mean you stop wanting altogether. You are still human. You still have needs, preferences, inclinations. But the relationship to those wants changes. They no longer own you. They no longer define you. They arise, they pass, and you remain untouched at your core. You eat when you're hungry, but you don't build your identity around food. You connect with others, but you don't demand that they complete you. You work, you create, you engage, but you don't measure your worth by outcomes. You participate in life without clinging to it. You move through the world without being consumed by it. This is what it means to deny the will, not to reject life, but to reject the tyranny of desire. Not to become a stone, unfeeling and cold, but to become awake, present, free. And here's the deepest irony. The moment you stop chasing happiness, the moment you stop believing it's owed to you, it begins to appear in unexpected places. Not as a constant state, not as something you can hold on to, but as fleeting moments of beauty, connection, stillness. Moments that are all the more precious because you're no longer demanding them. You watch the sunset, and instead of thinking about where you should be or what you should be doing, you simply watch. You listen to music, and instead of using it as background noise for your restless mind, you let it fill you completely. You sit with a friend, and instead of performing or projecting, you are simply there, fully, honestly. These moments don't come from achievement. They don't come from getting what you want. They come from being present with what is, from letting go of the need for life to be anything other than what it already is. This is the paradox Schopenhauer understood, that the pursuit of happiness makes happiness impossible, that the denial of desire opens the door to something deeper, that the acceptance of suffering transforms it into something bearable, even meaningful in its own strange way. Because when you stop resisting pain, when you stop seeing it as evidence of failure, it loses its power over you. It becomes just another experience, another wave in the ocean of existence. It comes, it goes, and you remain. This is not nihilism. This is not the belief that nothing matters. It is the recognition that mattering itself is a construct of the will, that the universe does not owe you significance, that your life does not need to be justified by some external standard, that you are free to exist without purpose, without meaning, without the constant pressure to prove your worth. And in that freedom, in that radical acceptance of the absurdity of existence, you find something most people never touch. Not happiness, not fulfillment, but peace. The peace of no longer fighting reality. The peace of no longer demanding that life be different. The peace of simply being, without agenda, without expectation, without the burden of hope. This is liberation. Not the liberation of achieving all your dreams, but the liberation of no longer being enslaved by them. Not the liberation of getting what you want, but the liberation of wanting what you have. Not the liberation of escaping suffering, but the liberation of no longer needing to. Schopenhauer's philosophy is not for everyone. It is too dark for those who still cling to hope. Too honest for those who need the illusion of progress. Too radical for those who believe that desire is the path to fulfillment. But for those who are tired, for those who have chased long enough, for those who can no longer ignore the patterns of craving that govern their days, it offers something invaluable. A way out. A way through. A way to live without the constant weight of unfulfilled desire. And so the question is no longer, how do I get what I want? The question is, what happens when I stop wanting? Not as an act of resignation, but as an act of rebellion. Against the will. Against the culture of endless consumption. Against the lie that happiness is the goal. Because the truth is, you were never meant to be happy. You were meant to be aware. And awareness, once fully realized, is its own kind of freedom. Not the freedom to have everything, but the freedom to need nothing. Not the freedom from suffering, but the freedom within it. This is Schopenhauer's final gift. Not a promise, not a solution, but an invitation to stop running, to stop chasing, to stop believing in the fantasy of fulfillment, and to simply be here, now, awake, alive, free. So I leave you with this. If you could see your desires for what they truly are, blind impulses pushing you forward with no destination, would you still chase them? Or would you finally stop running? Share your answer in the comments below. Because this conversation doesn't end here. It begins. If this exploration shook something loose in you, if it challenged the way you see your own life, subscribe to this channel for more philosophical deep dives that refuse to comfort you with lies. And when you're ready to go even deeper, watch the next video. Because the truth doesn't stop with Schopenhauer. There are other voices, other perspectives, other ways of seeing through the illusion. And all of them are waiting. The question is, are you ready to keep looking?